Coming to you from France. We're talking wide receiver rankings. We're going to go 40 deep here. We're going to talk about a lot of players. Top tier, we don't really need to discuss too much. I mean, we have CeeDee Lamb. Yes, he was great at 24 years old last year. I mean, the guys that he historically comped to, Julio Jones, Larry Fitz, A.J. Green, Odell, Brandon Marshall, Des Bryant. Then you had Lamb, St. Brown, Jefferson. Obviously, we're going to talk about those guys as well. But the difference between Lamb versus someone like Justin Jefferson is if you were looking at CeeDee Lamb at 24 years old, going into his age 25 season, it's not like his situation got worse. You still have Dak Prescott. Brandon Cooks, another year older. Maybe Jake Ferguson is okay, but you lose Pollard. You bring in Zeke. Overall, CeeDee Lamb projects out to have like a 30% target share in one of the best offenses in the NFL, or at least that's what Vegas sportsbooks are currently projecting out. Some of the other wide receivers in Tier 1 here, you can draw maybe a red flag or two. CeeDee Lamb, you really can't, so that's why he is going to be my number one guy. Going down to number 2, Tyreek Hill, obviously immaculate last year, almost had 2,000 receiving yards on the season, average about 24 points per game, 114. Ridiculous. If you're going to look at Tyreek, however, there will be a little bit of a difference. One, this is going to be a wide receiver that's going into his age 30 season. Obviously, we're expecting a 25-year-old player to either be peaking or maybe even getting a little bit better. By the time you're getting to 30 here, you're not going to continue to naturally improve. Two, if you were looking at Tyreek, I know a lot of people are concerned about the playoff stretch that he has with Tua maybe going up against some teams in cold weather. You have that massive narrative. I'm not super concerned there, which is why Tyreek's only going to be down at 2, right? Mainly, I'm just going to knock him for the age in comparison to CeeDee Lamb in particular. Now, I thought we were going to be unique when we initially ranked Ja'Marr Chase at 3. It looks like everybody is drafting Chase at 3 currently on Underdog. It makes sense because you have Burrow, presumably fully healthy. At least that's what Vegas sportsbooks are projecting out right now. Chase has been at the very top of the NFL if you're looking at intended air yards, if you're looking at almost any advanced metric. With Ja'Marr Chase, this is someone that we can say, okay, well, if Burrow is healthy, he's in a top 5 to 10 passing offense. He is an elite talent. He's incredibly young. You don't have to worry about the age. Whereas Jefferson, I would make the argument Jefferson's the most talented receiver in the NFL, but you have the combination of Sam Darnold and a rookie quarterback that we don't know what to expect from. So Jefferson will be down at 4. I don't want to take too much away from Justin Jefferson because you go back to see what he did just a year ago. And I mean, still, this is a wide receiver that dealt with pretty bad quarterback play. I mean, remember, you had no Kirk Cousins for the second half of the year, essentially. Yeah, Jefferson himself got injured, yet he still managed to put up 18.5 points per game. So despite him being a wide receiver that is going to be in a really bad situation, I'm kind of fine just ignoring it and taking him in round 1. I just do prefer the guys that have better quarterback play here. And then Amari St. Brown at 5. I'm ranking these guys for underdog drafts. I think that's what everybody's drafting in right now, considering the fact that, hell, it's June. Once we get to August, we can go through and we can get out some full PPR rankings where maybe we're going to give a bump up to St. Brown in comparison to Jefferson. But particularly for half PPR, which underdog is, we're going to give the benefit of the doubt to the big play receiver in Justin Jefferson that potentially can go out there and not necessarily command as many targets or receptions as Amon-Ra St. Brown, but do just a little bit more with them. And of course, all these guys top tier, you can't make a mistake. They're all here for a reason. They all have wide receiver 1 overall upside. So yeah, I mean, I love these options. Dropping down to tier 2, this is one of the changes that we've had since the last time we made these rankings. I'm going to go A.J. Brown over Puka. Now, yes, Puka, we'll give the argument for Puka then Brown, because Puka was the guy I had ranked at 6 in the last time we dropped these. Puka's a wide receiver that last year put up a better season than A.J. Brown, and Puka was a rookie. Okay, very simple. Yeah, Matthew Stafford, a quarterback that projects out to be in the top half of the NFL in terms of passing volume as well as passing efficiency. Whereas if you are going to be looking at A.J. Brown, Jalen Hurts still is someone that I love from a fantasy football perspective. I mean, Jalen Hurts, one of my most drafted quarterbacks on Underdog at the moment, but a lot of that has to do with the fact that Jalen Hurts has rushing touchdown upside himself, so you may have a lower passing volume offense in Philly. Now, and this is something that maybe I shouldn't give as much credit to as I do, but to be honest with you, the reason I'm going A.J. Brown here over Puka is if you look at underdog pick'em lines, if you look at pretty much any pick'em lines, if you look at any player props across the industry, you will see that A.J. Brown currently is priced in at essentially about 200 extra yards in comparison to Puka and an additional 2 receiving touchdowns. Plus, if we add on the fact that underdog is going to be half PPR scoring and we're more so incentivized to go for the big play with the best ball aspect of it, I think I'm going to go A.J. Brown. I also prefer stacking Jalen Hurts at the 3-4 turn with A.J. Brown. rather than having to wait till we get Matthew Stafford at the very end. If you're playing in a full PPR redraft league, which obviously we're going to dive into depth with more so in August, there I think you can make a strong argument still to have Puka ahead of him based off target volume. Now, dropping down to our next tier, all these guys have concerns. All these guys have positives. Garrett Wilson is someone that, yes, has never come close to finishing this high in fantasy football. We are expecting a massive Garrett Wilson breakout. It's not like I'm the only person saying this. Hell, he's going in round 1 of Underdog drafts at the moment. But with Wilson, you have a massive quarterback bump and play from Zach Wilson to Aaron Rodgers. If you look at the adjusted yards per pass attempt for Zach Wilson last season, you can make an argument, Zach Wilson, the worst quarterback in the NFL. So you have the bumping quarterback play. Garrett Wilson's still incredibly young. If you look at the target share that Garrett Wilson has commanded in New York, Garrett Wilson has almost cemented himself as already an elite wide receiver at the NFL level in terms of getting targets. The question is, can he be a lot more efficient with those targets? And I think what he needs is going to be more efficient quarterback play, which is why a lot of people are going to be taking him round 1 because you have the Aaron Rodgers bump. And yeah, I'm fine taking him round 1. I have him at the top of this tier, but I do have him with a lot of these round 2 guys as well. Like we have Marvin Harrison Jr. here at 9. Harrison's a very tough player for me to draft at the moment because he is going ahead of like Jonathan Taylor in underdog drafts. I would prefer Taylor. I'd probably prefer going running back in that slot. My thing with Harrison is I don't necessarily think it's possible for him to continue to rise up rankings at the moment. I think that he's almost capped in where he's already going at the 1-2 turn, which we've never seen a rookie wide receiver go nearly this high in fantasy. But you can say, okay, well, Mason, I don't necessarily know if we've ever seen a rookie wide receiver be as talented as Marvin Harrison Jr. If we were drafting for these underdog tournaments where we are highly incentivized to try to chase upside in weeks 15, 16, 17, like Best Ball Mania, $25 buy-in, $15 million prize pool, $1.5 million for first. You kind of want to be going for rookies that have the potential to break fantasy football in the final stretch of the year. So I'm going to give Harrison a bump here in comparison to these tier 3 options. A big reason, too, is I love getting Kyler Murray at the end of round 7 if we're able to. Now, our next guy will be Drake London. Drake London, very similar to Garrett Wilson, very similar to Marvin Harrison Jr. He is a projection. We've never seen London come anything close to this before. And very similar to these other guys, I'm not walking out on a limb and saying, oh my gosh, I know something y'all don't. Kirk Cousins is going to make the passing offense better in Atlanta. They're going to be more pass happy with this new coach. Everybody knows that. There's a reason Drake London's going at the beginning of round 2 of drafts. Do I feel comfortable taking him there? I'm probably not going to be doing so over Jonathan Taylor, to be honest with you. But he is dominated from a market share perspective. He's like a year younger than Tank Dell. He's younger than Zay Flowers, still incredibly young. Really, the only target competition you have there is Kyle Pitts. So it's understandable for Drake London to go here. Elite prospect, elite market share numbers. He was just very disappointed because horrible quarterback player, very similar to Garrett Wilson. But yeah, you can't expect the bump given the fact you have Cousins coming over. Brandon Aiyuk at 11. This is a receiver that obviously significantly better than any of the guys above him in this tier, at least so far in fantasy. Like last year, leaps and bounds better than what we had from London and Wilson. I'm going to be a little hesitant with Aiyuk, because his situation arguably gets worse going into this next season, where if he is in San Francisco, what's he looking at? He's looking at another round 1 talent coming in. Whereas the possibility of Brandon Aiyuk getting dealt, that's what's more so scaring me from putting him at the very top of this tier, where if you believe for a fact the Niners are going to try to win it this year, it makes sense for them to go through and just tell Brandon Aiyuk, hey, man, we have all the leverage in this situation. You're going to play without a contract, yada, yada, yada. And then you can go through and you can look for greener pastures in 2025. If you think Aiyuk is for sure a 49er, then by all means, move him to the top of this tier. Draft him at the 1-2 turn. Take him ahead of Garrett Wilson. Take him ahead of Drake London. I just don't know that right now. So if he gets dealt to Carolina, if he gets dealt to Pittsburgh, which I'm not saying is going to happen, I do think it's in the range of outcomes, then all of a sudden I think he drops an entire tier for me. On the other hand, if Deebo gets dealt, I think you make the argument that Aiyuk jumps up to the A.J. Brown Puka tier, which we'll talk about in a second. Olave will be our next guy. Olave, kind of a similar boat to the other guys in the same draft class, right? Similar boat to Garrett Wilson, similar boat to Drake London, and that he's proven that he is phenomenal talent based off market share numbers. He hasn't broke fantasy football based off how bad his passing offense has been. The reason we're going to have Olave behind these other guys, even though Olave's been better than Drake London in fantasy so far, is Olave goes from a bad situation to a bad situation, and nothing changes. You still have Derek Carr here. So we can sit here and we can say, oh, Garrett Wilson gets Rodgers, Drake London gets Kirk Cousins. Chris Olave still has the check down king, but Deebo Samuel coming in at 13. Deebo, very similar story to what we have with Aiyuk. I want to come out here and I want to rank him higher. And if Aiyuk is dealt, I am telling you right now, Deebo Samuel will be a 1-2 turn pick, which is why in these underdog drafts where it's like a best ball mania, like I said, $25 buy-in, $1.5 million. Y'all have seen me time and time and time again. This is how I've won tournaments on underdog. I'm willing to swing for the fences. I'm willing to take the guy with an incredibly low floor, an incredibly high ceiling, and understanding, yes, his price may move throughout the course of the offseason. I think Deebo Samuel is one of these guys. If you get him late round 2 right now, if there's a 10% chance Aiyuk gets dealt and Deebo all of a sudden jumps to being a guy that's going at the 1-2 turn, you can lock in an upside start that maybe not too many other people have access for. And the Davante Adams here, with Adams, I thought I was going to go all in because all these guys in round 2 at wide receiver, we've made videos about this. They all feel gross, right? I mean, they all have massive red flags. You can make an argument for yada, yada, yada. Ultimately, it's understandable why people would want to go with Davante Adams over these guys. That's why he's in the same tier. But my hesitation with Adams is similar to what we were talking about previously with someone like Chris Olave. It's not like the situation has gotten dramatically better. Yes, have Gardner Minshew coming in, but it's not like Minshew has proven over a large sample that he's an above average NFL quarterback. He's an exciting guy. I'm rooting for him, but let's be real. It's Gardner Minshew. If you are looking at Davante Adams, the man's going into his age 32 season. If we're using the RotoViz screener to come out with historical comps, you know, Jimmy Smith, who had a similar age 31 season, Hines Ward, Donald Driver, TJ Houshmandzadeh, Roddy White, Santana Moss, Torrey Holt, you had very good names, but the median projection with these guys, their following year at age 32, just because at 32 you're going to be worse, is like 10, 11 points per game in a full PPR format. So I think you can go with Adams higher than this if you have faith in Minshew. I just don't necessarily. And if I'm trying to chase the highest ceiling possible, I'm trying to win Best Ball Mania and win $1.5 million on underdog. I'm going to go with Deebo. I'm going to go with Aiyuk. I'm going to go with these guys that if their situation were to change, then all of a sudden they could break fantasy football, even if it maybe doesn't change and maybe Aiyuk projects out to see, half a point less than Davante Adams through the course of the season. I'm more so chasing the ceiling rather than that median projection. And of course, if you want to draft on Underdog with me, I'm going to be doing it as soon as we get back to the States. I promise you, the second we leave France, we are going to be streaming on Underdog again. They're available in pretty much every single state. And this is where we draft every single day for years and years and years. I won $150,000 on Underdog 2 years ago. Their best ball drafts, so no time commitment at all during the season. So I'm able to draft hundreds of teams every single year. And if you want to draft with me, you can use code FLOCK. They're going to give you a 50% deposit bonus up to $250. Plus, with code FLOCK, you'll get my 2024 rankings. Plus, with code FLOCK, you'll get my 2024 draft guide. Plus, with code FLOCK, you'll get a special mystery pick'em that's going to be something like Luka Doncic more than less than half a total point, or maybe a baseball player more than less than half a total pitch, depending on the day. But moving over to our next tier, we are going to have Jalen Waddle at 15. Waddle has been a riser. Y'all know I'm a Waddle guy, right? I mean, this is someone that helped us win a considerable amount of money on Underdog 2 years ago. But ultimately, you do have a little bit of a cap ceiling with Tyreek there. If anything were to occur to Tyreek, then you have the massive boom. I am fine betting in on Waddle because I think in general this is going to be a very good offense if you're looking at what Las Vegas sportsbooks are telling us. But I do want to reiterate, a lot of people are really concerned about what you have with the final 3-week stretch for the Dolphins' schedule. Now, our next guy will be Nico Collins. And yes, I initially ranked Stephon Diggs ahead of Nico Collins. And I think we made a massive mistake because if you go through and if you look at what Nico Collins did from a yards per route run perspective last year, you had like Tyreek Hill, Nico Collins. Nico Collins proved that he was an elite alpha last season. I think a lot of it was due to the fact that CJ Stroud is an MVP level quarterback. I think a lot of it's due to the fact that you didn't have a ton of target competition there. Yes, you had Tank Dell, but ultimately it's not like Dell, and at least in my mind, is a true wide receiver one for an NFL franchise. So I think Stephon Diggs coming over is going to water down the target share that you should expect from Nico. I'm expecting his yards per route run to come down. But to look at how good he was in this situation and the fact that he does have a year on Stephon Diggs, the fact that he is a significantly younger player as well, I do think I have to take my L. I think we have to put Nico Collins ahead of Stephon Diggs. We're going to go Mike Evans at 17. With Evans, I was a little hesitant at first saying, okay, I mean, this is a wide receiver that was drafted back in 2014, right? He was drafted alongside Davante Adams. While Evans has been a consistent rock in fantasy football, it's not like we've seen Mike Evans be a top 3 wide receiver in fantasy, a top 5 wide receiver in fantasy anytime soon. I mean, dating back to, I want to say, the past 5 years, you have those elite seasons from Davante Adams where you don't have them with Evans. But then you go through and look at Mike Evans last year and go, okay, I mean, this man just put up another season with 17.5 points per game. This man just put up another year with 77 receiving yards per game. We know he's going to be at the top of the NFL with his projected touchdown rate year in and year out. The median projection with him going into his age 31 season, based off historical numbers, should be about 11, 12 points per game. So I think we have to give the benefit of the doubt to Mike Evans over someone like Stephon Diggs, where Diggs, I want to make a strong case for, and I still really like Stephon Diggs in round 3 of underdog drafts. But obviously, with the change in offensive coordinator last year, you did see a significant step off in the second half of the season where you just have absolutely no red flags with Mike Evans that you'd have to deal with. Now, dropping down to our next tier, we're going to go DJ Moore at 19. I want to be very clear. The Chicago Bears passing offense will be the best passing offense they've seen in maybe a decade. Definitely the best passing offense they've seen since Trubisky. Now, with that being said, there's no way DJ Moore sees the same target share he had last year with the addition of Rome, with the addition of Keenan Allen, maybe even some of these secondary pieces, because they have like DeAndre Swift, they have Cole Kmet, they actually have weapons now in Chicago. Now, DJ Moore, I mean, we all know the Thursday night game. We all know he is a phenomenal talent, and I do think you have to draft him as the Chicago Bears' number 1 receiver. My thing is, if you're just going through and looking at the historical data for how rookie quarterbacks produce fantasy options, you can occasionally get like Deshaun Watson coming in and DeAndre Hopkins goes from like still being a top 10 wide receiver to maybe like a top 3 wide receiver. But outside of that, there's like that one name we can point to in 2017. More likely than not, their wide receiver 1 typically is a wide receiver 2 in fantasy, and we have a ton of Chicago guys to run through. Devonta Smith will be wide receiver 20 here. Devonta Smith may still be my most drafted wide receiver on Underdog. At least he was my most drafted wide receiver when he was going at the 3-4 turn. Now you have to take him at the beginning of the 3rd. It is a little bit tougher in comparison to these other names. I'm still completely fine drafting him at his price. Just personally, I haven't been doing it a lot because I took him so much at the end of round 3. Malik Neighbors will be our next option. I mean, if this was any other draft class, Malik Neighbors would be the wide receiver 1. With that being said, this is typically where the number 1 rookie wide receiver gets drafted, right? It is like a borderline top 20 option in fantasy. And Neighbors does have projected out to be one of the worst passing offenses in the NFL. If you look at implied team totals from Las Vegas sportsbooks right now, the Giants are projected out to be a bottom 5 offense. Yes, a lot of that's due to the fact that they can't run the ball. Yes, a lot of that's due to the fact that they have Daniel Jones at quarterback. It's a good situation. You have no target competition. It's a bad situation that you're in a low-volume passing attack. Pitman will be our next guy at 22. Pitman, I actually drafted a ton of last year. I went from hating Pitman 2 years ago to really liking him at cost last season. And now this year, you add in A.D. Mitchell. You have Josh Downs going into year 2. You have presumably a fully healthy Jonathan Taylor. Anthony Richardson is going to be out there running the ball as well. Where I'm sitting here going, okay, in mid-round 3, I'm okay if you wanted to draft Michael Pittman. There are just some names in middle round 4 that I think are about the same. Like, I'd honestly maybe rather just have T. Higgins in mid-round 4. I mean, T. Higgins is our next guy. And if you're going off these rankings in underdog drafts right now, you will probably end up with a considerable amount of T. Higgins. Now, I am making this list. I am making these rankings under the assumption that T. Higgins is a Cincinnati Bengal this next season. If Higgins is not a Bengal, we have serious issues. We have to scrap this. Higgins has to slide down these dramatically. But if you go back to healthy games from T. Higgins 2 years ago, 3 years ago, I know it seems like forever ago because Joe Burrow and Higgins were injured last year. But if you go back to 3 years ago, 2 years ago, in games that are fully healthy and T. Higgins plays 75% more snaps, he's averaging a wide receiver 12 finish. He's right there as a borderline wide receiver 1. He's still incredibly young, still projects out to be in one of the best passing offenses in the NFL. Yes, they added another name, but Tyler Boyd's gone, so maybe that opens up more targets. Our next guy will be Zay Flowers. I find myself taking a decent amount of Flowers, where I didn't draft Flowers last year, to be honest with you. I mean, to be honest with you, I'd rather have JSN last year. Mistake. I'd rather had Addison last year. Probably pretty good. I'd rather had Quentin Johnston last year. And obviously that was a massive mistake. But nonetheless, I mean, if you're looking at Flowers, this is someone that was a good enough prospect to go round 1 of the NFL draft. This is someone that followed it up with a very strong rookie season, Historical data tells us you want to be drafting guys going into year 2 at the wide receiver position that were good prospects and had good year 1s. You want to be buying high on those players. And I really love the price of Lamar Jackson this year in round 4. So I'm completely fine taking Zay Flowers and then following it up with Lamar. DK Metcalf will be our next guy. DK Metcalf's been a high-end wide receiver 3 for 3 straight seasons. Yes, he's big. Yes, he's strong. Change in coaching staff. Maybe people are thinking they're going to throw the ball more. I don't know. I don't think Geno Smith is a top 10 quarterback. I don't think he's an above average quarterback in the NFL level. He's just average. Maybe JSN's a little bit better. You still have Lockett there. So Metcalf's been a top 30 receiver consistently, but outside the top 20, I think this is right where he belongs based off the historical finishes. You'd have to go 4 years ago to find a DK Metcalf top 15 finish. Cooper Kupp will be our next guy. I mean, with Kupp, so damn hard to know what the injury impact truly was last season. I think a lot of this comes down to what you personally are projecting out. Because if you look at this Kupp profile, this is someone in his 30s that has declined for 2 straight seasons now. So if you're sitting here going, okay, it's a tale as old as time, declining wide receiver, he's going to get overdrafted based off just his name, I understand you. You go and do you. Or if you're going to sit here and go, hell, he was just injured last year. Cooper Kupp's still Cooper Kupp. I'm going to go out there and I'm going to draft the wide receiver that, had the Triple Crown 3 years ago. He led the NFL in receptions, receiving yards, receiving touchdowns, and broke fantasy football. I understand if you want to get that guy in round 4 or round 3 of fantasy football drafts. So I think a lot of it comes down to, do you think you can excuse away Kupp's season last year based off injury? And do you think you can gain target share away from Puka? And then our next guy will be Tank Dell. Now, with Dell, he is a massive riser. I'm going to tell you right now, if you're using these rankings, you're not going to be getting Tank Dell in underdog drafts. Dell will never go behind T. Higgins. Dell's probably going to be going ahead of Zay Flowers a ton. And if you look at Dell, what's very surprising, tiny wide receiver, right? At his size, he put up the best wide receiver fantasy season we've ever seen. And he did as a rookie. But you would expect what? This is someone that's just moving the chains, operating close to the line. No, if you look at his intended air yards per game, he was getting used as a deep threat in Houston last year, which is very interesting. I don't know what the usage is going to look like now that you have Stephon Diggs coming in. Looking at Nico Collins' numbers last year as well, I don't know. I understand where people are coming from with Dell. My thing is, while we typically want to be betting on wide receivers going into year 2, where you see that natural progression and that massive jump, especially after good rookie seasons, Dell's a little bit of a weird instance in that this is someone that's older than Kyle Pitts, right? This is someone that's going to be 25 years old this next season. So it's not a typical year 1 to year 2 jump. I think still draft him. Very good offense. It was a really good rookie. Personally, I just think he's a little bit too much of an outlier for me to chase ahead of ADP. Our next guy will be George Pickens. With Pickens, no Deontay Johnson, bump up the target share. With Pickens, possibly better quarterback play with Russell Wilson. Couldn't be much worse than Kenny Pickett. So, yeah, going into year 3, still incredibly young. Hell, yeah, I believe younger than Tank Dell, if I'm not mistaken. And, yeah, improved going into year 2. So I think you just have the natural trajectory up in year 3. My thing is I don't think Pittsburgh's going to be that good. Addison at 29 is someone that if Cousins was in Minnesota, I would be even higher on. Now, full transparency, if you are using these rankings, you are going to be drafting a crap ton of Jordan Addison. So I probably wouldn't use these 1-for-1, to be honest with you. I think you could probably get him in the next round. But if Kirk Cousins was still a Minnesota Viking, I would probably have Jordan Addison ranked around wide receiver 20. This is someone that was a better prospect than Flowers in my mind. I think the NFL agreed with it. He went ahead of Flowers too. This is someone that won the Biletnikoff. This is someone that excelled on multiple collegiate offenses. And this is someone that had a great year 1 and played a lot of games that Kirk Cousins missed. If you're looking at some of the advanced metrics, yards per route run, not great, but I want to say it was still a bad situation in Minnesota last year. Now, yes, you have to compete with targets with Justin Jefferson. Yes, obviously you have Darnold. Yes, you have J.J. McCarthy. The quarterback situation is not great, and you have a target hog in there with Jefferson. That's why I have him as low as 29, because to be honest with you, with how good of a prospect he was, and with the rookie season he put up, if the situation was good, I would have him significantly higher. So personally, when Jordan Addison's being drafted as a borderline wide receiver 4 in underdog drafts right now, probably going to end up as my most drafted receiver or one of them. Amari will be our next guy. A lot of it hinges on what you expect with Deshaun Watson. You bring in Jerry Jeudy, maybe you say Jeudy takes more targets. But, I mean, you have no Nick Chubb there at the beginning of the season, or at least that's what people are projecting based off where Nick Chubb's going currently in drafts. They don't really bring in any other running backs outside of Deonta Foreman, so it makes you think, okay, possibly are they just going to be airing the ball out? Do they have faith in Watson? And if that's the case, obviously Amari can be fine. Keenan Allen is someone that we faded last year and did not work out. So I thought, okay, wide receiver going into year 10. Mike Williams is finally showing up. And they take a wide receiver in round 1 of the draft. Maybe you see a step back with the Keenan Allen target share. And this is someone that's won in fantasy based off him getting force-fed targets and obviously being the best chain mover in the NFL, at least one of the best over the past 10 years. Well, then Mike Williams immediately down for the year. Quentin Johnson turns out to be one of the biggest bums of all time. And Keenan absolutely smashes last year. Now you're going to a situation with worse quarterback play going from Herbert to Caleb Williams. Maybe Williams is better in the long run, but I'm not expecting him to be better year 1. You have significantly more target competition with DJ Moore, and they take Rome inside the top 10. So I'm actually going to throw Rome right here as well. The thing is, if you really love Keenan, or if you really love Rome in drafts this year, I don't know if you want to be hammering these Chicago guys or just take Caleb Williams. Because Caleb's going to have rushing upside. DJ Moore is going to get fed. Or DJ Moore is going to be at least fine, right? So if DJ Moore's decent, Caleb rushes the football with any type of consistency, or Keenan and Rome smash, then Caleb may be a borderline top 6 quarterback year 1. So if you are drafting these secondary Chicago Bears weapons frequently, I do think you need to be drafting the hell out of Caleb Williams because really Caleb has to smash for it to work out. Which it very easily can, right? I'm actually probably drafting more Rome than Keenan right now just because I have them ranked back-to-back and Rome's cheaper. Now our next tier, this is massive, you do you. Xavier Worthy, small, speedy, maybe a better real-life NFL wide receiver than he will be in fantasy, but he has Patrick Mahomes, hook 'em horns, perfectly fine with them. Jaden Reed, very good passing offense in Green Bay, but you have Christian Watson, you have Dontavian Wicks, you have Romeo Doubs. I do want to say Romeo Doubs doesn't look as good as the other options in my mind based off the school data. And also what you have is you have a running back that can catch the ball and 2 receiving tight ends. So you're the wide receiver, one of the best offenses in the NFL, but I do think that Green Bay, similar to what we said last year, it may be in a spot where it's what you have with like the Kansas City Chiefs over the past few seasons, where Mahomes at the very top of the NFL in passing, but if 10, 12 skill positional guys are touching the ball from week to week perspective, and maybe it's not enough for anybody to be great, but obviously Reed has upside in this offense. Brian Thomas Jr., Christian Kirk back-to-back. If it was a full PBR, just regular home league, go Christian Kirk over Brian Thomas Jr. I'm specifically ranking Thomas ahead of Kirk in these underdog tournaments where it's like $25 buy-in, $1.5 million for first, where you are trying to chase the highest ceiling possible. And I think Thomas is significantly higher ceiling for the final stretch of the year. Hollywood Brown at 37. Same thing that we're going to say with Worthy, right? If you're in an underdog draft, people are going to be going with Hollywood consistently over Xavier Worthy. I think it's a massive mistake. Look at the Hollywood contract. He's getting paid nothing for a wide receiver. Look at how bad he's been with his efficiency metrics over the past few seasons. I don't know what the ceiling is there. I'd rather just roll the dice on Worthy in the following round. Terry McLaurin, our next guy. Terry, we say this every single year. We've said it every single year for the past 5, but at this point he's like a 29-year-old wide receiver that's never finished higher than top 20 wide receivers in fantasy. He's never been higher than wide receiver 20 from a points per game perspective. Now you have a quarterback that's a rookie that's going to rack up a ton of rushing production. I don't know. Chris Godwin, 39, will be someone I'm drafting frequently. Godwin was someone that I consistently started last year, and I apologize if you asked me in a live stream if you should have started Chris Godwin, because if at least it was the first 10 weeks of the season, my answer would have been, hell, the Bucs are moving the ball down the field. Godwin's getting targeted frequently. The only thing that's happening is he's not scoring touchdowns. But yeah, fire him up. He's going to start scoring touchdowns. We know touchdowns are extremely volatile. Godwin did not score anything last year. But the targets were there, still incredibly young. I don't think the offense is going to be worse than it was last season. So I'm actually expecting a bounce back for Godwin. I think a lot of his numbers are going to look similar, just we're going to expect a higher touchdown rate than we saw the year prior. Calvin Ridley at 40. I hated Calvin Ridley when he was going at the 2-3 turn of underdog drafts last season. Calvin Ridley, this price tag's fine. It just comes down to what you expect with Tennessee. My hesitation is sportsbooks are telling us that this is going to be one of the worst offenses in the NFL. And they're looking at Keon and Ladd. I did not like either guy's prospects, but they're both penciled in to possibly be the wide receiver one with elite level quarterback play for their respective teams. So I think you have to give them credit just based off that. But I think that's all I have for you. I pray to God that this video turned out to be decent. And if you enjoyed it, hit the like, subscribe if you want to hop in a draft with us when we get back to the States. We will be drafting on Underdog every single day. You can find that link in the description, comment section. If you use code FLOCK, they're going to give you a 50% deposit match up to $250 on a new account. And you'll get our 2024 rankings with code FLOCK. You'll get our 2024 draft guide with code FLOCK. And also, it's available in damn near every state. Plus, you get a message. You get a lot, okay? Use code FLOCK, link in the description, comment section. Appreciate you. And yeah, I hope to be drafting with you soon.